Hello, welcome to my channel. You can probably tell by the title this is going to be a hard video for me to even make, and huge trigger warning. It could definitely be hard to listen to. So I am going to be talking about a time that I came very, very close to dying. I'm going to be talking about some medical trauma, ICU, and being on a ventilator. So why am I making this video? A few reasons, actually. First, for a personal reason, it's been 13 years today. The story starts 13 years ago today. So it's like the anniversary of this event, and every year it brings up a lot. This is what's on my mind. So that's, kind of the personal reasons why I'm sharing the story. Another reason is I know others have been through experiences like I've been through, and even if it's not exactly, or the circumstances were a little bit different, it can be very isolating, and I want to share my story. So for anyone out there who has gone through something similar, or you have a loved one, I just want you to know you're not alone. And I think there's kind of that survivor high that we can get on that feels good. You kind of feel like a superhero. You've cheated death. It's a hard thing to explain, because although being a survivor of something, it brings up a lot of gratitude. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful I'm here to tell this story. There's also this darker side to this experience, that there's some hard memories. My world changed, completely changed that day. And I just want to acknowledge that it can have a big impact. Medically, things have been a struggle ever since. Emotionally, mentally, they've been a struggle. So that's another reason why I want to share it. I'm not a doctor. I can only share my own experience as a patient, and even my own experience from what I remember. Some of the stuff you'll find out I wasn't even conscious. So, okay, I'm just going to start. At the time, I was pregnant. So one more time, this will be a trigger warning. This will have some really hard stuff to talk about, to hear. It has to do with some pregnancy trauma, it's pregnancy complications, and loss. There is going to be talk of loss in there too. So trigger warning, if this isn't something that you're comfortable listening to, go ahead and shut it off. But if it's something you're curious about, I would love to share my story and my experience. The other thing I want to mention is you might notice that as I'm talking, like I'm smiling right now. When I get nervous, sometimes I smile, and it's just a way of me coping with it. So I also want to mention, it might seem like when I'm talking about this that I'm very unemotional, and this experience, when I have memories of it or I talk about it, I get very detached from it and disconnected. It's like I'm watching a movie and I'm talking about somebody else. It's almost like I'm talking about somebody else that I don't even really know. So as I'm describing it, it's almost like I'm describing a movie or a plot of a movie to you. So if it seems kind of weird that I'm a little unemotional, this is just my way of coping with these memories right now. And it's not that it doesn't bother me. I just wanted to kind of share that with you. Okay, so 13 years ago, I was pregnant with identical twins, and the pregnancy was really high risk from the beginning. But at this point, I was 32 weeks pregnant, and I had been on complete bed rest for a while. And my doctor, in fact, said, things are looking good, and you don't really need to be on bed rest anymore. You can start to have some activity. So I was really excited about that. I woke up and I felt okay. Didn't feel great. I had been feeling kind of weird for about a week. But that morning I woke up and fell off, but you kind of think, oh, I had hyperemesis in this pregnancy, which is severe morning sickness that never goes away. It was better at this point, but it wasn't unusual for me to feel kind of sick and kind of off, and you're pregnant, right? So I just kind of blew it off, but I started getting worse and worse, and then I started getting pain. And again, you know, you're pregnant, you can have pain here and there, right? So then I started getting really sick and I was vomiting a lot. My husband calls my doctor, and I had been working with like my regular OB, and I was also working with the high risk doctors at a different hospital. So my husband called my regular OB who delivered our oldest as well, and he talked to me, and I was just like, you know, I must just have a bug, I might just have a flu or something. I just, you know, the pain, I know it's kind of normal for pregnancy. And he was listening to me, and he's like, you need to go get checked out. And just in case, I really feel like you need to go to this other hospital, the high-risk hospital that has a NICU, because the hospital that he worked at and could deliver, you can't deliver at 32 weeks, so they don't have a NICU. So he said, you know, I just, instead of getting you through here and having to transport you, just go ahead and go there first. My husband is driving me to a hospital that's 20 minutes away. I just started getting sicker, and it just, my pain was getting worse. And get to the ER, they checked me in. High risk doctor, what I was supposed to see because of my pregnancy, was delivering another baby. So the nurses would come in and be like, okay, do you just have to wait a little bit? I'm like, I can't wait. I'm in so much pain, and I was throwing up. And they had the monitors, like the baby monitors, on my stomach, and I was in so much pain. It was on my right side, like up high by my ribs on my right side, but it was also kind of all over. It was mostly on right there, but my whole stomach hurt. And not like a stomach ache, it just like this pain started up here and it just radiated throughout my entire, really my whole body. But I have a really high tolerance for pain, and I just said, can I please take off these monitors? I can't have them, they hurt so much. And I was like trying to rip them off, and the nurses were like, and this is very out of character with me, I'm like one of those, I have a high tolerance for pain. I just kind of go along with whatever they need. They said, you can't do that. We have to monitor the babies and all this other stuff. So I was just like, please get the doctor here. And they were getting nervous because they could tell things weren't good. So the doctor finally gets there, and he was like, well, we have to figure out what's going on. He does an ultrasound. Everything looks good. And he's doing an ultrasound to see, is there a reason why I have all this pain? And one thing that was a little bit of a concern I had in my first delivery, something called placentaaccreta. And I almost died from that first delivery. Placentaaccreta is when the placenta attaches too deeply into the uterus, and when you deliver, you just start hemorrhaging and you about to die. So, you know, there was some thought, you know, was something else going on, and he just didn't see anything. And they had all kind of thought, well, maybe you would have another accreta, but it's one of those things, like my other one was undiagnosed. Like you couldn't tell until I delivered. It's really hard to detect. So it's not like the doctor's fault that it was undiagnosed. It's just, you couldn't tell by an ultrasound what the placenta, if it had grown in through the uterus. So fast forward, they did my blood work. My blood pressure was fine. So, you know, some of the general things that they are looking for, things looked okay there. They gave me magnesium, if I can remember, and I might be jumping around a lot just because my memory of this is really kind of scattered. So they gave me magnesium, and I felt like better, like right away. It really helped. I was like so grateful. Anyways, the doctor came in and said, you know, your labs are getting worse. Your liver enzymes are really elevated and they're getting worse. We need to figure out what's going on. He comes in with this huge textbook and just opens it up and says, I think you have this. And he said, I think you have HELLP syndrome. I did. And I didn't have high blood pressure, and you don't have to have high blood pressure to have HELLP syndrome. It's a really rare complication that only happens in pregnancy, and the only cure is delivery. So it's very rare, but if you do get it, it usually is accompanied with high blood pressure, like maybe with preeclampsia, and then turns into that. I didn't have high blood pressure, which made it a little more difficult to diagnose just because they weren't really looking for something like that. But I did have everything else. I had low platelets, elevated liver enzymes. I think there was one other thing that I had. But so he's like, you know, we need to deliver. It was a bigger hospital, and I was working with the high-risk doctor, so I probably had more choices there than I would have at a smaller hospital, or maybe if I wasn't with the high-risk doctors. A lot of times if you have HELLP syndrome, they won't allow you to have an epidural. they decided to induce me. They gave me Pitocin to get things started, and the anesthesiologists came in and they said, we are okay giving you one, but you just have to know the risks. The risks are, and I don't remember because I was in so much pain. I was just like, give me the epidural. And they said something about that there's a risk that since you have HELLP syndrome and if you have an epidural, that there's something that can happen to your back. I didn't really know what it was, something to your spine, your spinal cord, but it can be fixed through another surgery, but you just need to know that there is a risk that this could happen to you. So I said, I don't care, just give me the epidural. It didn't make any higher risk for the babies. So I said, go ahead. And the next morning at 10 a.m., so this is actually going to be tomorrow, is our twins' birthday. My epidural actually never even worked. I never felt it. Pain was there the whole time. But having very tiny babies, it's easy to deliver. In fact, they were like, don't push, don't push. So they get me into the operating room because I'm only 32 weeks pregnant. It's connected to the NICU. So they can take him, even though I was going to deliver naturally, they could take him right there. They knew also with twins if I needed to have a cesarean. So I'm in there and they deliver the first twin and I hear him cry and I get to see him for like a split second and then they whisk him away. After that, I hadn't delivered the other twin yet, and talking about this part is going to be really hard for me, so I'm not going to go into a whole lot of details, but things just got really bad really fast. I just was in so much pain and I just felt sick. I just like, help me. And my epidural wasn't working, so the doctor was getting really like upset with the anesthesiologist that was there, and I thought he was getting upset with me because I'm just like in a whole different world. I'm in pain and he's like, I don't know what's wrong. Anyways, the anesthesiologist is like, I don't know what else to do. The epidural's not working. He's like yelling at him, get your supervisor now. And anyways, the supervisor or whatever, the head anesthesiologist comes in, and at this point, I saw the first baby. I was just in pain, and he said, I'm sorry, we're going to have to just like put you out. What I didn't know is I was hemorrhaging, so I said, oh, thank you, just put me out, I don't even care. It was bad. Just a side note, I never got to see the other twin. My other twin did not survive. My husband got to see him. I didn't. I'm going to keep going. So at this point, I'm knocked out. I don't know what's going on. I kind of thought that they kind of suspected that the placentaaccreta was happening again. It actually, what had happened was placentaaccreta. It was even worse than the first time, and the placenta grew even farther into the uterus, and basically it was causing me to hemorrhage. But it happened so fast, like you can die like within minutes. If it wasn't for modern medicine, if it wasn't for a modern hospital, I would not be here today. So that was my last memory, and I'm going to fill you in with what the doctors told me, my husband has told me. But the next thing that I know is, and this, if I have to say like there's like the scariest moment of my life, there's a lot of hard moments. This is one of the scariest. The next thing I remember, and I don't know how much time had passed, I could hear people, and I realized it was nurses. And I realized, okay, I'm in the hospital. I remembered giving birth. I remember being knocked out, being put under general anesthesia. I could hear the nurses. I don't remember everything that they were talking about, but I do remember certain words, and I knew that things were serious. I knew that I might not make it. And the fact that I had these thoughts, I didn't know if I was alive. But it took me a while to even get to that point. My first thought was I could hear them. I could tell that they were nurses. Couldn't really make out what they were saying. And my first thing that I did was I tried to move my hands to feel my stomach, because I knew there was a chance that if I had this complication and I was hemorrhaging, that I would have to have a hysterectomy, and that would mean no more kids. Of course, I thought about the twins. I was worried about them, but wasn't quite all with it. I just was trying to feel my stomach to see, did I have a hysterectomy? Because I knew that if I had to have a hysterectomy, it was going to have to be fast. I would have to be cut open. So I was thinking, okay, do I have a scar? Like, what's going on? And I just remember I couldn't move my hands. It's really weird. So then I just tried opening my eyes, and all I saw was black. I didn't know if my eyes were open or closed. All I knew was all I saw was black, dark. I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't see anything. I tried to talk, and nothing would come out. I was trying to let these nurses know that I'm awake now, and nothing would come out. And I started just even screaming. And in my head, I was screaming, but nothing was coming out. So I couldn't see, I couldn't talk, and I couldn't move. I couldn't move at all. So I was like, what is going on? I had a couple thoughts. One was, I remember this whole thing with the anesthesiologist talking about the epidural, and there's some risk with my spinal cord. So I thought, okay, I don't remember what they were talking about, but I must be paralyzed. Like, my thought was, am I paralyzed? I didn't know. I thought that I was paralyzed. When I heard the nurses talking and I realized that how serious this was, and I couldn't tell, were they talking that I had died or I might almost die? I didn't really know what they were talking about, but I knew things were serious. I thought, I'm dead. Like, it was very out of body. Like, I could, even though I couldn't see, it was as if I wasn't in my body, and I was having these thoughts, not knowing if I was physically there. It's really hard to describe. So later on, I'm, trying to scream. I still can't scream. I still can't move. So I'm like, I'm either paralyzed or dead or both. And then the next thing I remember is hearing my husband and my mom, and I'm still trying to scream and move and look at them and try to get their attention, and nothing. I could tell that here are these two people, two of the closest people I have, my husband and my own mom, and like, they know me, and don't they know that I can hear them, and I can't really make out what the nurses were telling them, but again, there was just a lot of somberness. Everything was really quiet. So again, I just didn't know, like, am I dead? Am I paralyzed? I didn't know. I couldn't scream. I was just literally in the dark, and I'm hearing them, and I didn't know, like, was I on a hospital bed and they're next to me, or were they next to a dead body and I'm just like being able to kind of hear about the situation, or almost like be present in the situation? I didn't know. Anyways, this went on, which seemed like forever, and I don't know how long it really was. It was probably a few hours. This is where it gets really, like, very fuzzy, so I'm gonna have to kind of tell you what others have told me, like what my husband has told me. And so what had happened was, I'll fill you in what happened, and then to let you know, and then I'll kind of go from there. So I did end up having placentaaccreta, and I started hemorrhaging, and I had asked this high-risk doctor, please don't take my uterus if you don't have to, if I have this complication again, and I had this conversation with him like that earlier that morning when we were in, I really don't want to have a hysterectomy, because I knew that I almost had one after my first delivery, and I couldn't imagine. So I did have that, but he really, like, where other doctors might have just given me a hysterectomy, it still wouldn't have changed anything. I still would have, I had HELLP syndrome, I had accreta, and I still would have been in really bad shape. I still would have been in what I now know, I was in the ICU. So that doctor did so many things. I had interventional radiology come in, and this is what I had happen in my first delivery. How I was able to save my uterus is they go in and they put these they're arteries that connect to your uterus. It's called uterine artery embolization, and they put these little dissolvable things up there, and it stops the blood. I'm probably not explaining this very well, but again, I'm not a doctor. This is just my experience from what I can remember. So it wasn't working. They had to do it a few times. They ended up having to put some permanent metal coils in there, which I still have. I don't notice I even have them, but I do. And that's what basically helped save my life. But I had lost so much blood. At one point, they couldn't even get a blood pressure on me. They weren't quite sure if maybe I did die. So I was getting blood transfusions because they were trying to get blood in me as fast as it was coming out. And they couldn't keep up. They were literally squeezing the bags of blood to try to get blood back inside my body, because it was just leaving. It would come in, they were giving me blood transfusion, they were squeezing it fast, and it was just going right back out. So eventually they were able to get things to kind of slow down enough, and my body had lost all of its blood and been replaced my body had been up through a lot, like a lot. And so in order for it to even have a chance at recovering, at this point, things were pretty touch and go. Like they weren't quite sure if I was going to make it, but they knew the best chance that they would have is if they put my body into a medically induced coma and just allow my body to just heal, like give it a break. It was working so hard. When I woke up in the ICU, I was in a medically induced coma. That's why I couldn't move. I didn't know that because it's not like they could explain it to me. You know, I'm out. I'm in a coma. I was in a medically induced coma, so my body was basically paralyzed. And again, I'm probably not explaining this right medically, so I'm just kind of going off of what I remember and what I was told. So I was in a medically induced coma. My body was paralyzed. I had a breathing tube. So I was on a ventilator. This is the part that I was on a ventilator. And so I can tell you just a little bit that I remember being on a ventilator. I was on a breathing tube. When you have a breathing tube in, you can't talk. So that's why I was literally, I could, hear my own voice in my head, but I was literally trying to scream and I couldn't because you can't talk. You can't use your voice. Also, when they put me in the coma, they taped my eyes shut. So my eyes were taped shut, so I couldn't see. I was paralyzed and I had a breathing tube. So it all makes sense. And I'm just going to stop right there and say I'm so grateful. I had amazing doctors and I would not be here today if they didn't act so fast. And woke up during the medically induced coma, and I'm guessing that this is where they didn't realize that I could hear them because I was still in the coma. And this is where things are kind of fuzzy too, because I won't get into too much, but it's fuzzy. I don't really know how, but I could hear them, and it was very out of body experience, but they didn't know that I could hear them. Eventually decided later that evening to start to slow tape my body out of, like wake it up and out of the coma. And my husband was there, and there's a lot of details, but if you're curious what it's like to be in a medically induced coma or on a ventilator, all I remember is, it was doing its job. It was breathing for me because I couldn't, and it saved my life. So I don't have that many memories about, I couldn't feel anything, so it's really hard for me because of the state I was in. It might be different than other people and their experiences being on a ventilator, but what I can say is after they put me up and they took the breathing tube out, I had a really hard time talking because you have this tube in your throat and it's in your vocal cords or passes through by your vocal cords. And so I had a really hard time talking and my throat hurt a lot. So that is all I remember of the ventilator because I was in a coma for most of it, but it did make my throat really sore. It saved my life. It was hard to talk afterwards for at least a few days. It was a while. My throat, I remember hurting for, I want to say like a week, but I don't remember completely. So I was in the ICU fighting for my life. I had one baby that passed and then another baby, my surviving twin, that was in the NICU, neonatal intensive care unit. So to put some other pieces together, when they took me away, the nurse, I don't know if it was like one of my nurses or one of the NICU nurses, I don't know, gave him this little card. Everyone knew it was bad. They did not know if I would make it or not. And she gave him this little card and it had a blood sample, like a little drop of blood. That drop of blood was from our surviving twin. And she said, she looked at him right in the eyes and says, "You need to keep this. You need to hold on to this. Do not lose it, because if the mother doesn't make it, it is very difficult for a father to just walk out of the hospital with a baby if there's no living mother." So that was put things into perspective for him fast. It was really scary, and I know that there's a lot more details, but being in the ICU is not fun. Being on a ventilator is not fun. And I'm just talking about like the experience. The aftermath is a whole other video. I'm still dealing with some of the aftermath. I've never medically been the same ever since this experience. I've had a lot of challenges medically that have come because of this. And mentally and emotionally, it's been hard. I was definitely changed that day. Things can change in an instant, and I'm so grateful I'm alive. And I don't know if I'm going to keep this in the video. I might edit this out, but just in case, that night when I was in the ICU, and the ICU is really, it's a hard place to be because the ICU is kind of like your last, like that's the last stop. This is the last resort. And a lot of people don't make it. They told my mom and my husband that they could only have 2 people in the room at a time. They said, if you see more than 2 people in the room, it's not a good sign. It's because someone's not going to make it and they're allowing more people to come in to say goodbye. They said, so you can only have 2, and the hours were really limited, like basic. It just was it's a very different experience than just being in the hospital. It's very scary. There's just so much. I mean, I have a lot of memories, but I will just tell you a few other things and kind of wrap it up because I just wanted to kind of just give a very brief explanation about, what that is like. And it is life-changing in so many ways, good and bad, actually. My husband, they asked him when they weren't quite sure if I was going to make it, what, our surviving twin, what his name was. And he said Mason. And we had never, since I still had 2 more months left of this pregnancy, we hadn't completely decided on names for both twins. But that is one name that we picked. So Mason, Jude. And Jude is a lot of meaning behind that, but basically the nurse asked him and he kind of named our son without really checking with me, but that's okay. I had a dream that night, and when I'm saying I'm dreaming, I had what I felt like were dreams, but I felt like that night when I was in ICU, the dreams were, again, very out of body, like I am in the hospital room, but I'm not in my body, and I'm also not, I'm like above the room. I can't even explain it. It's gonna sound crazy to a lot of you. So that night, again, it was very out of body. I was like not in my own body. I was like above the room, and God was there, and I got to talk with God. So whatever your thoughts are, I'm just gonna tell you what this was and what my experience was. And we're talking to God, and he's just told me, he said, your twin has passed. I know that's hard. His name is Noah. I said, Noah? He said, yes. Because just like Noah from the Bible had a long journey, your Noah, his journey isn't over. It's not over yet. Even though he's not going to be physically with you, his journey's not over. He has a lot still to be with you guys and to give Mason. So his journey's not over. There's a lot in store for Noah, and this is his name, Noah. And sometime, like maybe the next day, I believe I told my husband, God told me that his name is Noah. And so that was his name. So our twins, Mason Jude and Noah Jude, they share the same middle name, and that's actually was picked out by our older son. I'll wrap this up because this could be a really long video. I'm not sure like how much to really get into or share, but the end result is I'm here. For the most part, I'm healthy. Do have some medical complications because of being in the ICU and because of everything that my body went through, but I did survive. I'm so grateful. So please don't get me wrong. I am very grateful. It's a hard thing to kind of like explain. I'm grateful, but it's still hard. It can be both. I have scary memories from it. And Mason, his birthday's tomorrow. He will be 13, and every year we celebrate both Mason and Noah, and we have a cake for both of them. We sing happy birthday to both of them, and it's, I tell Mason, it's just as hard as it is, you have your own guardian angel. Noah's with you all the time. So I'm going to wrap that up here. That is briefly my experience. If you guys have questions, let me know. I'll answer them if I can. I can definitely do videos about the aftermath of all this, but this I just really wanted to be primarily about this day and tomorrow. Yeah, it's hard because like I'm so grateful that I got to survive. I'm so grateful that Mason survived. I also have a lot of grief about Noah, and I also have a lot of grief that when you want a family, you don't imagine this. I had traumatic births with all my children, so there's some grief that goes along with that. Yeah, I'm not sure what else to say, but I'm going to wrap this up, and I just wanted to share it. It's on my heart. It feels like the thing that I'm supposed to do right now. So if someone needs to hear this, or someone just even about their own curiosity what that was like. Anyways, that is my journey, my experience, and So I'll see you guys in the next video. Lots of love to you.